So welcome everyone back to another weekly broadcast from Franchise Voicebox, Franchising Stories in Asia. My name is Robert Bosley, and I have with me Mr. Sean Ngo, the CEO and co-founder of Via Franchise Consulting. Recently, we have been discussing franchising in various countries around Asia. And for this week's program, we want to focus on the Philippines. And the Philippines, is one of the most populated countries in the world with around 110 million people. And what's interesting about it is that 92% speak English to a fairly high level. And it has a GDP of just over 9,000 US per capita. And that continues to grow year on year and has for some time. It also is kind of unique because it has 5 cities ranging between 1 and 3 million people, all of which do a lot of business. So they have multiple key markets to do any sort of business in the Philippines. Now, Sean, the franchising industry in the Philippines is very mature, having been there for more than 45 years already. So what would you say are the top 5 reasons to franchise in this market?
Thank you for that question, Robert. It's a very, very good question. I think the Philippines, as you know, is, like you said, has a very established franchise industry. In fact, it has one of the largest in Asia outside of China. There are, according to current statistics, well over 2,000 franchises in the country today. And it's an estimated value of over 25 billion US dollars that are transacted through these 2,000 plus different franchise systems. And just to give you a size of that, that's approximately 7% of the country's overall total GDP. So it's very, very similar to what the franchising industry is in the US, where it's about 10% of the entire GDP of the US market. Now, also, I guess a big part of why they have such an established franchise industry is the fact that Filipinos in general are very, very pro-American, very pro-Western in general, but specifically very pro-American businesses and brands. And you'll see all kinds of American products and businesses and franchises throughout the Philippines, right? And you name it, they're all here. The McDonald's, Starbucks, KFC, Pizza Hut, all the big name brands that you find in the US and in the many Western countries, you will find readily accepted here in the Philippines. And a big part of that too, again, is the fact that the country with 110 million people is extremely young. In fact, it has one of the youngest populations in all of Southeast Asia. The median age is 25.7 years old. So it's really, really exceptionally young. Rapidly rising economics. GDP is growing over 5% over the last 20 years. All that is summing up to a very, very positive outlook for the Philippines from an investment standpoint, from a franchising standpoint, and from a consuming class standpoint as well. And the Philippines is one of only 2 countries in Southeast Asia that has an enormous Filipino diaspora, the other one being Vietnam. But in the Philippines, there are over 10 million Filipinos living and or working overseas. And that's a lot of Filipinos. That's nearly 10% of the entire population of the Philippines is living and or working overseas. And you will find many Filipinos in the US, throughout the Middle East, in multiple countries in the Middle East. You will find many Filipinos in Canada, Australia, as well as Japan. So it's hoping to bridge not only the culture, but the business practices and the fact that many Filipinos speaking English really expedites that whole acceptance of Western brands and international brands, for the past 2 to 3 decades.
Good. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of reasons to franchise in the Philippines. The fact that they speak English just makes it a whole lot easier, and their acceptance of American brands. I didn't realize that there was 2,000 different brands from international ones. So I think that's great market. Now, what those specific sectors are attractive for this Philippine market, and why would you say that?
Well, that's a great question. From our experiences and from what the data shows, every time I'm in the Philippines, I'm always amazed of how developed modern retail is. It's a land of shopping malls, from upscale to mass market to a little bit lower end. You've got everything that you need from a shopping mall perspective. And everywhere you go, you see people enjoying. They're out with friends, they're out with families, they're out with their boyfriends and girlfriends. There's a lot of enjoyment with F&B, food and beverage, restaurants, whether it's casual dining to fine dining to fast food and QSR. I think you've got it all, right? And I think Filipinos in general really enjoy going out instead of staying at home, especially when you've got beautiful malls and they're all air conditioned and it's just a wonderful place. The Mall of Asia in Manila is one of the biggest malls in the entire world. It is an amazing place. If you haven't been there, so it's quite an experience. And like most other Asian countries, I think a lot of focus has been in F&B, and it's still a very, very hot market because it's such a huge population base that really wants to try out new things. But at the same time, also, again, with entertainment, there is a lot of opportunities to leverage on this population, this middle income class that is growing every day, and really just a very young population. So more entertainment venues beyond just cinemas, beyond just the typical arcades that you find in many shopping centers. There's lots of opportunities for big branded and edutainment as well as entertainment brands in this particular part of the world.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I got lost in that mall, as I think most expats have. Anyone who's gone to the SM Mall of Asia.
I've gotten lost many times there, not just once.
It's just massive. It just never ends. Okay. Last question that I have for you is, what is some of the latest franchising news that involve the Philippine markets that you can kind of share with our listeners?
Well, the Philippines really outpunches its weight. I mean, it's a country that is still emerging and still developing, and certainly has made great strides over the last couple of decades. But it clearly has the attention of large, iconic brands. You have iconic brands like Shake Shack from the U.S., the premium burger segment player, and I think right now there's like 4 locations in Greater Manila, and it's just a fantastic brand that is doing quite well in places like the Philippines. And not to be outdone, the American-born Chinese fast food chain Panda Express has also popped up recently, also in the Philippines. So if you grew up in the U.S. or have visited the U.S., it's very likely you may have eaten at a Panda Express, and it's just another iconic brand from the U.S. that is, choosing to enter the Philippines as one of the premier markets and first entries into this part of the world. So it says a lot about the Philippines and how developed the franchising industry is, and how how solid and very high potential the consumers here are for these types of brands. And again, because of its size and development, you have even iconic Filipino brands like the Jollibee Group that owns multiple brands, right? That are now not only doing extremely well in the Philippines, but now are exporting their brands to other parts of the world, to China, to even the US and Europe, and to the Middle East and many, many more countries within its target. So, it's one of those countries where not only brands are coming in, but many brands are already successful at taking their brands internationally as well.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think it's more true in the Philippines than most other Asian countries. A lot more brands have gone international out of that market. So thanks, Sean, for all of the informative discussion. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our video. The Philippines is a very stable country. It has a very mature franchising industry, and it has a lot of positive reasons why a franchisor, an international franchisor, would be interested in looking at that market, and also why investors in the Philippines should be looking at bringing in international franchises. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss next week's episode of Franchising Voicebox. You can see the latest franchising brands that are available for the Philippines at our website at vffranchiseconsulting.com. And please feel free to email us at any time, info@vffranchiseconsulting.com. We handle both franchise sales and consulting services all across the Asian region, and we'd just love to hear from you. So thanks again, Sean, and have a great day.
Thank you, Robert.